All right. Hello, and thank you for joining us for our Webinar Wednesday series. My name is Sharon, and I'm with SIPA, your Colorado Government Authority, helping you get more information and services online and offering Colorado government's grant funding, which is the topic of our webinar today. Presenting about SIPA's microgrant program is Beth Justice, our Sales and Marketing Director, and covering the SIPA Gov Grants program will be our Gov Grants Director, Noah Kaplan, and Grants Coordinator, Anya Dixon. Before we get started, please go ahead and turn on captioning if you need or desire, and note that during this webinar you are muted. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function and then the chat box for any other comments or information that you'd like to share. We will unmute folks at the end for any remaining questions that you may have. We'll have a post-webinar survey and a link to a survey about the grants program. We hope you'll provide your feedback because we really do appreciate that. Please join me in welcoming Beth, Noah, and Anya. We're so glad that you've joined us today, and we thank you for your time. With that, I will turn it over to our presenters.
Great, thank you, Sharon. Can you go ahead and put us in slideshow? There we go. This is what we're going to cover today on the agenda for the SIPA microgrants, and then we will move into the SIPA Gov grants. So all of our grant programs support Colorado governments by providing digital services that improve resident experiences and foster connections between residents and governments. As you can see, it's extremely important that we provide governments from across the state, as well as the different governments that we can serve. How many people on this call have received a micro grant or a gov grant over the years? Can you give me the thumbs up on the emoji, please? Nobody? Oh, there we go.
We have several raised hands too.
All right. That's excellent. We're so glad that you're back listening to today's webinar. So for the SIPA micro grants, we award grants up to $10,000. And our application window is going to open March 1st and it'll close March 31st. And this is quite a bit of a review period, but we'll go April will be the staff review, and you'll see what we're doing in that in the time being. In May, the SIPA board committee will review the applications, and then our June board meeting, the full board will then approve all the micro grants for the awardees, and those will be announced in July. So let's look at what the FIT is. Is it a public-facing component to your project? That's required. Matching funds are not required. The micro grant is a simple application process. The reporting and the actual application can take 15 minutes to an hour. And all grants that have been awarded since we've started are found on our website, on our micro grant page. You can just click those little dots since we've done this and since 2010 and see what's been awarded and where it's been awarded and how much it was awarded for. It's a really great resource for you to get some ideas and to know what the funding looks like. So does the criteria time amounts of the grant program meet your needs? Then we should continue. So for the application process, the most important thing and the big change for SIPA this year is only 2 applications will be accepted per government. We have had a lot of applications in the past, so we want to get those down so everyone has a better chance, and we want to make sure that you're prioritizing your projects. Another very important thing, if you did not receive a confirmation email after you've submitted your application, we did not receive that application. So either please reapply or get a hold of me to make sure that we can check that for you. But please make sure you get that confirmation email. The deadline is March 31st. What's really important is to clearly and concisely state why your project is impactful. You know, spelling, grammar, and format is always important. And then so that we know that you have done your due diligence for your project, you know, a quote from your supplier is highly recommended. Go ahead and up that with your application. And then write simple steps to implement and roll out your project. That'll give us a good idea that you've thought this through and that you're ready to get started. So always a consideration when we're looking at over 100 applications. Why should your project be chosen? Give us your story. We want to hear that.
And Beth, I think another important point too is that it does not have to be one of our suppliers that you get a quote from. It can be anyone.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharon. So just some ideas about scoring insights on SIPA side. Applications are reviewed internally to make sure that all the criteria is met. We do try to do that prior to the application close date, just because if you have something else that you want to do that would work, we want to make sure that you have every opportunity to do that. If you were previously awarded, did you complete your project and did you complete the reporting on that project? Grants are distributed to all governments across the state, and the board of directors do not provide feedback for this program. People sometimes want to know, why didn't I get the award and someone else did? That's really hard to determine when we're looking across all states and all across the state and all sectors of government. They might just be selecting one over another. It might not just be about your organization or how you wrote it. It just might be maybe your neighbor asked for the same thing and we hit that area. So once you are awarded a grant, we have a grants management system. You'll need to create a login. You'll need to accept the award via grant eligibility form. All funds this year will be distributed through an ACH payment. That is new for us. Your certificate will be mailed. We always have a nice certificate for you that you were awarded. The reporting back on your project is required within 1 year. Any unused funds must be returned. And then the most important thing we get is, can I change what I wanted to spend the money on? No, you cannot. What was looked at on the application, what was reviewed by our board, what was approved is what the money needs to be spent on in its entirety. And then awardees are strongly encouraged to attend SIPA's user conference to be recognized. This year, it's going to be on September 3rd, 2026 at Empower Field at Mile High. We don't have many more details yet, but we'd love for you to join us there and hope that whether you are awarded or not, that you plan to join us. This was last year's conference, and we were really excited to call up all these awardees with Terrell Davis and recognize you all. Thank you.
All right, Noah, we'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. Give me 1 second to get my presentation up here. All right. Good morning, everyone. Let me just start with an introduction. So I'm Noah Kaplan. I'm the director of the SIPA Gov Grants program. I've been with SIPA for a little over 2 years now. I started in January of 2024. Essentially was brought in to create and launch the grant program that you're going to hear about. So making grants has been part of SIPA's mission for a long time. You just heard from Beth about all the great work that SIPA has been able to support over the years through the micro grant program. And a couple of years ago, our leadership saw an opportunity to really build on and expand that grant making. And that is what became the SIPA Gov Grants program. So we're now in our second full year, going into our fourth cohort. You'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. And let me just pause for a second and let my colleague Anya introduce herself, and then we'll jump into this portion of the presentation.
Yeah, thanks, Noah. Anya Dixon-Arguello, a pleasure to be with all of you. I always say when you email regarding the Gov Grants program, you might get Noah, you might get me. So I serve and support the program as grants coordinator, and you will hear from me in a bit.
All right, great, thank you. So I already kind of touched on a little bit of this, but I want to start with just an overview of what the SIPA Gov Grants program is all about. So what we're trying to do with this program is really support technology projects across Colorado that are meaningfully changing the way that people interact with their government. And when we say government, we mean any type of government. That can be, state agencies, cities, counties, towns, special agencies, special districts, K-12, higher education, any type of government entity across Colorado that is eligible to work with SIPA through an eligible government entity agreement is also eligible to apply and receive one of these grants. So we're really excited to be able to provide grants across all those different government types, like Beth showed you in her part of the presentation. The biggest difference between the microgrants program and the GovGrants program is the size of the grants. So as Beth mentioned, the microgrants program goes up to a maximum of $10,000, whereas our SIPA GovGrants awards start at $25,000 and go up from there. So $25,000 is the minimum. As you can see here on the slide, our average award has been in the ballpark of around $400,000, but I will say the distribution is very wide. Because we have some awards that are to large state agencies that are supporting folks across the state. They have some very large projects. We've also given awards at or close to that minimum of $25,000 to some small communities, special districts, and it really is a very wide distribution. So I don't want anybody to be sort of frightened by the big numbers here. We certainly welcome applications at that $25,000 mark, and applications that are larger than that as well. The important thing is that we're looking for high impact resident facing technology solutions. So, and when we say high impact, we don't mean that you need to be a large state agency, or you need to be Denver or Colorado Springs, or even Fort Collins or Durango. It is high impact for your community. So we are looking for awards that are going to create meaningful improvements for the people in your community in the way that they need to interact with government. And then importantly, we're looking for solutions that are scalable. We're looking for ways to test and try different things, trying to do government technology differently in a way that hopefully then, if we can prove that it works and it has the impact we're hoping for, that it's scalable. So that can be scalable within your government, or by reproducing the solution across governments. And we'll talk a little bit more about those criteria as we go forward. So let's go a little bit deeper into kind of what the GovGrants program is about. So first and foremost, we want to see that every application for SIPA GovGrants Award supports SIPA's mission. And you can see SIPA's mission here on the screen: providing efficient and effective services for residents through modern business practices and innovative technology solutions. So that's like the very first line when we look at every application is, does it support SIPA's mission? And if it doesn't, then we're not really going farther than that. So we're looking for applications that support SIPA's mission. Once we get past that very initial review, then we're getting into these other criteria. And all of this is covered in our SIPA GovGrants program manual, which you can find on our website. But I want to provide a little bit of context here. So first is we want to see applications that have a theory of change. So we want to see, and Anya's going to talk a little bit more about this later, but that you've identified the problem you're trying to solve. So don't start with the solution. Don't start with, this is the technology that we want to implement. You start with the problem. What is the problem that the residents of your community are facing in the way they interact with government? And then move to your solution. And how is that solution going to help address that problem? That's what a theory of change is. Then we want to see that you have the capacity to actually make that change. Do you have a clear plan for how you're going to implement this solution? Do you have a strong team that has experience implementing these types of solutions? Can you execute on what you're proposing to do? And then finally, we want to see the potential for impact. Think about it as the return on investment, but obviously, return on investment looks a little different in government. But we want to see, does the impact that you could have if your project is successful align well with the amount of funding that you're asking for? Is there a reasonable sort of relationship between the size of your project and the impact you can have? And then, like I said, does it offer that opportunity to scale? So are we starting with something that is relatively small and focused, and then we can grow it if it works? We've provided a number of resources on the SIPA GovGrants webpage for applicants. I want to talk about a few of them now. I mentioned the program manual, which is not on this slide, and that is really, honestly, the most important because that is the one that really lays out everything you need to know about this program. But we've provided these kind of more targeted resources that are specific to how you develop an application. So the first is our applicant worksheet. The application process for SIPA GovGrants includes a narrative and a budget portion. The applicant worksheet is focused on that narrative portion. It's optional. You don't have to use it, but I will tell you that 90% plus of our applicants do because it really walks you through everything you need to do to complete that narrative portion of the application. Writing your problem statement, explaining your solution, providing your implementation timeline and plan, and then how you're going to measure success. All of those things are in the applicant worksheet. If you use it, you will, you'll complete everything we need to see. If you decide to submit your narrative in another way, you're welcome to do that. Just use the worksheet at least as a reference to make sure that you're including all those pieces. The next resource we provide is the budget template. And this one actually is required. So in order to submit an application to SIPA GovGrants, you have to prepare your project budget on our template. And the reason for that is, one, for consistency, to make sure that we are sort of have apples to apples across all the applications that we're looking at. And then also consistency with our financial and expense reporting for grants later. So the budget, really helps us align to those future awards. So the budget template is required. And then the last piece that Anya is really going to go into a deep dive on a little later is our KPI refinement worksheet. And this is our newest resource that we just started providing. So we noticed that sort of one of the challenges that some of our applicants were having was getting from here's what I want to do to here's how I'm going to measure if what I did worked. And so we created this worksheet to really walk you through sort of the logic and the steps of developing how you're going to measure your project success. And like I said, Anya will go and do a little bit more of a deep dive on that as we go forward. I'm not going to talk any more about the worksheet. It's pretty self-explanatory. It's really a series of questions that you fill out. For the budget, I do want to add a couple of specific points before we move on. So when you're filling out your budget, I want to start with, you don't need to know down to the dollar every expense that you expect on your grant. We certainly don't expect that. We want you to think, sort of to be forward-looking, but also to be agile and iterative and to think about being able to adjust as your project moves forward. At the application stage, we just want to see you specify your expenses as much as you can. If you have, a quote in hand that you're ready to move forward, that's great. And you certainly know what those expenses are going to be to a pretty close degree. And that's great, but we don't need that. However, if you are using estimates for your costs, give us a sense in your narrative of where those estimates came from. It's really important to us to kind of understand, like, how accurate do we expect those estimates to be? And where can we what are they based on? So we can kind of get a sense of your degree of confidence in those numbers. Round your values to the nearest dollar. Like I said, we really don't need them to be dollar for dollar specific, and we definitely don't need them to be specific to the penny. Feel free to round your values in your budget. That's great. And then finally, saving and submitting as an Excel file. Please don't submit your budget as a PDF. We need those budgets as the original Excel file, so please do that. On the don't side, a couple things that are a little different about SIPA GovGrants from other grant programs you may have interacted with that we think are important to highlight. First, our grants do not fund overhead, administrative costs or indirect costs. So please don't include those in your budget. The SIPA GovGrants program is designed to support direct costs of your project or program, and not those indirects. We also don't allow allocation of salaries for existing employees. If you are hiring a project manager or a developer, or assigning essentially staff 100% to your grant funded project, then the grant funds can be used for staff expenses, but they cannot be used for partial allocation of existing staff expenses. We really want these grants to fund things that are net new, and would not otherwise be, happening without the grant funds. And so that's why we have this particular policy. We don't want to be offsetting costs that are already part of your budget. We want to be adding and really encouraging you to do something new with this funding. And so the last part of that is please don't include any costs that you've already contracted for. They've already been committed, or especially they've already been paid. You cannot use SIPA GovGrants funds to reimburse yourself for costs that you've already incurred in the past. And when I say the past, that includes up to essentially when the grant agreement is actually executed. So if you submit an application and then while the application is under review, you go forward with a contract and you start the work, then that is no longer going to be eligible for an award. So you need to, be aware that the project costs that are eligible for grant funding are only those project costs that are after the grant has been executed and started. All right, now I'm going to pass it over to Anya.
Great. Thanks, Noah, for that overview. You gave us a really solid foundation on what we look for, of course, which includes the theory of change. This is a secret sauce on how you get an award, in my opinion, is KPIs, strong KPIs. We've received a lot of applications and no two applications look the same. So it's really helpful when applicants spell out very clearly what the problem is, what the proposed solution is, and the long-term impact. It's always helpful when you have an example, being that, again, so many of our grants they just range in variety. So we thought we would provide you with a specific example that you can kind of use as you think through a project you might want to propose. So when we say theory of change, really what we're saying is this one sentence that you see at the top. So just to read this out, if we do blank, then this change will occur in our community. That's what we're trying to see in an application when we get at a theory of change. So for our hypothetical example, we have the city of SIPA, which consists of myself, Noah, Beth, and Sharon. We, in the city of SIPA, realize that our constituents are facing significant barriers when trying to find or apply for public assistance programs. So just in general, any sort of public assistance, people are either maybe struggling to submit applications, and then they end up calling us, and then the phone lines get ran up, or maybe they attempt to apply, but then they don't ever submit the application. So regardless, tons of ways to improve that process. What the city of SIPA is proposing via GovGrants Award is that it will create a single user-friendly online application portal that houses all of the government assistance programs. So one platform that folks will apply on. So if we put these two parts of the equation together, the theory of change that we would say in our application is if the city of SIPA creates a single user-friendly online portal for all all public assistance applications, then more eligible constituents will complete the application successfully, and they will ultimately receive the assistance that they need. So in order to develop strong KPIs, which we'll get to in a couple of slides, it's helpful to really start with bare bones basics on what is the problem, what's the solution, what's long-term impact. All these slides that I'm running through really quickly are really broken out from the KPI worksheet. So I strongly encourage you to take a peek at that on our website if and when you get to the point of crafting your application. Great. Now, let's take a quick look at outcomes. Perfect, thank you. So something that we've seen, or I've seen in my short 8 months supporting the program, is folks will also, they kind of interchangeably use outputs and outcomes, and that doesn't always make for the strongest application. So when I say outputs, I'm referring to project milestones. So just going with this example of City of SIPA, and we want to put forth this portal for applications and public assistance. An output would be an exploratory and planning phase for that portal, a development sprint, maybe the testing phase, of course, a go live. Those are project milestones and deliverables that our vendor is going to help us do. And that's something that we'll want to hear about, but it's not necessarily how we measure outcomes for the project. So when we say outcomes, we really want to focus and hear from upfront what, like, yes, this is a great idea for a project, but what is going to be the goal, and what are we really moving the needle on when we intervene and provide this solution for folks. It's more than just a portal, right? We're increasing public assistance. So that's what we want to really spell out. So because we realize that as the City of SIPA in this example, these are the 3 different outcomes that we've identified as our outcomes for the project. So for this first one, we see improved access. So the City of SIPA will improve access for our constituents, especially first-time applicants of the public assistance program. So we really want to focus on reeling in those people, making sure that they can easily and successfully complete an application. The second one would be enhancing the user experience. So by introducing and implementing this new portal, we will reduce the friction and the time commitment required for people to complete and submit an application. The third outcome we're aiming for is increased quality. So the new system will help constituents submit an accurate application on the first attempt, meaning that staff won't have to reach out and have people resubmit. Folks won't have to jump into the portal more than they need to, and then we won't have delays. Let's take a look at how this all comes together. So again, this is broken out on the KPI worksheet really clearly and really well, but essentially when we are kind of at the stage of our application where we're putting together a KPI or a key performance indicator, we are looking and needing an outcome metric. So really, what are you measuring? And a success target. What amount of change will indicate that our project's been successful? So before I read off these examples that we used for our hypothetical example, it's important to also know and think through KPIs don't have to be more complicated than they seem. There are multiple types of KPIs. Some rely on baseline data, meaning that you have existing data that you are already measuring and want to improve access from. Others are just goal targets. But essentially what we're looking for, and especially at the application phase, is just that it's something that you've thought about. This is something that Noah and I would be happy to help you refine once we're post-award notification and kind of in that stage of administration. But essentially, we're just hoping that we see applications, and I think the evaluation committee as well, that there's some thought and connection to long-term impact via key performance indicators. So these first 2 examples here that you see are reliant on, or not reliant, but they use baseline data. So the City of SIPA, we're rather savvy and we track a lot of data. And so these first 2 examples are measuring from data that we're already tracking. So to read off this first one, what we are measuring is the number of abandoned application, and then you'll see the success mark or the success target, which is a rather large one with a time frame. So to read this off, reduce the number of abandoned applications by 50% within 1 year of the portal launch. What makes this a good KPI, in my opinion, is, again, we have all components of the equation of an outcome metric. What are we measuring? The number of abandoned applications. The success target, or what we're hoping to achieve, is we want that number to decrease by 50%, and we've given a time frame within 1 year. I'll offer the caveat that, especially at the application phase, it's helpful to have a time frame for the evaluation committee, but I wouldn't stress too much on maybe what that time frame looks like at the application phase, because it's very much still a proposal. Let's do another example, because I feel like the more examples you see, the easier it is to start thinking of your own. This one, again, it has a baseline. So reduce the average time a resident spends completing an application by 25% within 9 months of the portal launch. When I say baseline, what I'm saying essentially is the average time a resident spends completing an application. This is something the city of SIPA is already tracking. Therefore, we wrote it in a way that we already have a number, say it's 3 minutes, and we want that number to decrease once we implement the portal and are able to see how long folks are taking to complete an application. So that's what a baseline KPI looks like. Maybe your project is a new project where there's no existing baseline. It's a completely new and innovative idea and implementation. That's great. And so in that case, we want to see a target KPI. So that's what this third example is. So to read this one off, 85% of all submitted applications are completed correctly on the first attempt within the first 6 months of launch. When I think of target KPIs, I think of goals. This is probably a type of KPI that you see on more goals that you're developing, maybe for your personal use or even in like a role. So it's a goal number. It's something that should feel ambitious, yet realistic. And this is not something that the city of SIPA maybe is tracking currently, but post-award and post-project, this is something we'd want to measure. So just to spell out this one really clearly again, what are we measuring? The number of applications that are completed correctly on the first attempt. And then you see that success target. We've assigned a number value of 85%. We want to, our goal would be 85% of those applications are submitted correctly on the first attempt. And that time frame, which is a plus for sure. We will happily take any questions on KPIs once we kind of wrap up our presentation here, but also know that you can reach out to us if you have any questions after reviewing the KPI worksheet as well. Noah, I will pass back to you on timeline.
Thank you, Anya. So our timeline for the SIPA Gov Grants program, we've maintained basically the same sort of elapsed time, but it has moved around a little bit from cycle to cycle. So we want to make sure to let people know what to expect. There is a fairly long time period, both for the period that the applications are open, and then also the time that it takes for our staff and our evaluation committee to actually do the reviews. So we think it's really important that folks just kind of know what to expect. And that way you can plan for if you get an award, kind of knowing when you might be ready to kick things off. So, we're here now, February 18th at the pre-application webinar. Please know that we are still updating some of the materials that are on the website. So some of the materials that we've talked about today will have new versions up within the next few days or a week, but prior to the opening of the application, which will be on March 9th. So you can start submitting your application on March 9th. But by no means do you need to have your application ready to go on the 9th, because it will remain open until April 10th. So that application period will be open for about a month. And like I said, we'll have those, all of the newest versions of all the materials up by next week. So you'll have everything lined up and plenty of time to get that application ready. And then, I say April, May here for the evaluation timeline, because once we close that application on April 10th, There is a process first for kind of staff intake. So Anya and I are going to go through all those applications. Like I mentioned earlier, we're going to make sure that they sort of align with SIPA's mission, that they're eligible for the program, just kind of at that base level. And then we're going to do some kind of, summarization and just kind of preparation for how we present them to our committee members to help them out. And that takes us, a couple of weeks. And then we hand them over to our committee members, and they have, a few weeks to do their review, and they actually do all of the scoring. We're providing at the staff level just a basic summary of what we're seeing in the applications, but it's ultimately up to the committee to really decide how well each application fits with our program criteria, and to score it based on the criteria that you'll find in the program manual. And so we give them a good chunk of time to do that. And then once they've completed all their scoring, then they come together and we actually have a meeting with our committee where they discuss and they, have the ability to kind of finalize their scoring and their recommendations on what gets an award. And for this current cycle, our expectation is to have those recommendations from the committee in front of our full board of directors in the first week of June. So we hold our board meetings the first week of the month. And so that first week of June is when we're expecting to have board approval for this particular cycle. And then following that board meeting is when we'd be able to notify applicants of their award status, whether or not they've received an award. Once those award notifications have gone out, we'll have kind of some introductory onboarding process. There'll be kind of an onboarding meeting with each awarded grantee. And then we go into the process of kind of finalizing all the pieces we talked about today, the budget, the plan, the KPIs, all of those pieces to finalize a grant agreement. And we like to have those executed no more than 3 months from the date of award. So that would take us through early August in this case. So June, July, August, but ideally, even sooner. So just kind of be prepared for that to move pretty quickly if you do get an award. And then the last piece on this schedule is just our reporting. We do that on a quarterly basis. So the terms of SIPA Gov grants are typically 1-year awards or 2-year awards, depending on the length of time that your particular proposal needs for implementation and then also for measurement on the back end. But we're typically looking at 1-year awards or 2-year awards with quarterly reporting. So you can anticipate that schedule if you get an award. And the last thing I want to put in front of you guys today is a request for some feedback. Whether or not you have applied to the GovGrants program before, or today is the very first time you're ever hearing about it, we kind of want to know that. Like I said, we're going into our 4th cycle here, and we're really kind of at a tipping point for the program where we've kind of got a few cycles under our belt. We're looking at determining how to continue to grow and mature this program and what's working and what's not working. And we want to hear from you because ultimately that's, the opinion that's most important. So there's a survey link on the screen and we'll drop it in the chat and it will be in the follow-up email and all of those kinds of things. You'll have a couple opportunities to get this link, but it's a real short survey, just a few questions, and it'll really help us to decide kind of where to go next with this program. So if you've never heard about the program, that's okay. There's still questions that you can help us with. If you've applied and received an award and you're working on a GovGrants project every day, then there's questions for you too. We've got, really trying to get feedback from all of the different constituencies that make up the SIPA customer base to understand how you interact with this program. So please, if you can give us 5 minutes of your time, it is super, super helpful. I see that there's currently 127 people on this call. So hopefully we can get somewhere close to that in survey responses. It would be fantastic. All right. So as I mentioned in the Q&A, we were hoping to finish up with plenty of time for some questions. And I think we've done that.
And we have
Sharon?
some in the Q&A for you as well. The first two are about, do you ever fund a partial award? Or is it more competitive to apply for the full amount?
So I'm reading the question and I'm not entirely sure what is meant by a partial award versus the full amount. I'll say a couple of things that hopefully are helpful. I did mention at the beginning that the sort of relationship between how much you're asking for and the impact that you're able to make is one important criterion for us. And also, another important criterion is, like I said, that ability to scale, to sort of demonstrate success and then scale. So if you are applying for a very large amount for a technology that is essentially entirely new for your community, I think that is maybe not as strong on those particular criteria. If you can come in and say, we want this amount of money to do a pilot, and we're going to try it out. And then, maybe if it works, we'll come back in a future grant cycle and ask for additional funds to scale. Even with only 3 cycles so far, we already have a couple of applicants who have done that, who have done a pilot, and then they've brought the outcomes from their pilot into a future application, and then been awarded funds to continue to grow. So I do think it aligns well with our evaluation criteria if you have that kind of sort of phased approach, iterative approach. I think asking for a very large amount for something upfront when you haven't sort of done a lot of testing or piloting is going to be a harder lift for our committee. So hopefully that helps.
I think that kind of goes along with the last one that came in of, if I request 1 million, would you give, say, 500,000 if you can't give 1 million? And I think your answer of the phased approach is a great one.
Yeah, we have a few times, not super commonly, but we have a few times, kind of looked at an application and said, we think that there's kind of an opportunity here to start a little smaller than what was asked for. I would say don't count on that. Don't ask for the moon and expect us to sort of carve it down for you, because I think that is definitely more the exception than the rule. But we have, in a few cases, gone back to an applicant and said, if we were able to give you, half, would that, would there be a discrete part of the project that you could sort of, start with that amount of money? So I won't say we won't, because we have done it before, but it's definitely not our typical practice.
All right, excellent. Would SIPA consider funding existing projects? For example, we have started a project but don't have funding to take it to the finish line, so it is stalled. SIPA funding would allow us to upgrade to more accessible technology, same technology but more features, and allow us to complete our project.
So it's a difficult question to answer. I think, the way that I often answer the question of, is this specific sort of, technology or thing eligible for the GovGrants program, is that there's the question of, is it eligible? And then there's the question of, would it be a strong application, right? And those are 2 different questions. It is a competitive program. We decline more applications than we award. And so I think if it is technology that serves, government customers in Colorado, and would improve, how they interact with their government, then it is most likely eligible for the SIPA GovGrants program and would get through kind of that initial pass. Then the next stage is it goes to our committee and they score it. And I think if you came in with an application where, you'd started an implementation but sort of can't finish it, I don't know how strong an application that would be. But again, it's really hard to answer based on the details. And ultimately, it's not my call because I'm not doing the scoring. That's our committee members. So it's a difficult question for me to answer. I think, all I can say is, take a good look at the program manual, look at the criteria, and sort of, you have to decide how, if you think you can put together an application that, aligns well with those criteria.
And reach out by email or call if you have those very specific questions, because we'd love to talk to you. All right. Is SIPA planning on doing 2 Gov grant cycles again this year? And if so, when may the second one open?
Yeah, the answer is we don't know. So we have shifted. Obviously, last year we launched in January so that we could be done by June, July, and then launch the next cycle in August. That was difficult for our very small team to manage the overlap of the evaluation process and onboarding new awards, along with the management of the existing awards. And so the answer right now is we don't know. The reason we're starting a little bit later this year was to give us a little bit more time to prepare and to make sure that we're being proactive about thinking about what's working and what's not working. And again, putting that feedback survey together and trying to get the inputs that we need to decide what we want to do with the program long term. So what I can say right now is we hope to launch another round. I cannot give you any kind of date on when that will be, nor can I say definitively that it will happen. Right now, we are planning one cycle at a time. It's a very small team, and we're doing the best we can.
And I see Anya is answering how are you notified if you're awarded a grant? And it is by email, correct?
Correct. It is by email. So we send out if your application receives an award, you'll receive an email with essentially the next steps. Congratulations, you've received an award. Here's what you do now. If your application is not awarded, you'll receive an email indicating that. And we try as best we can to provide at least a little bit of individualized feedback on the reason for why an application is not awarded. I will say, again, it is our committee's decision at the end of the day what to award or what to recommend for award and not. And they are a group of people. So it is not always possible to give a super clear, statement of like, this is the specific thing that kept your application from being awarded. But we really do try. When we're at that stage and we have all of those applications that have not been awarded, we go through the scoring and we go through the notes from the committee and try to provide you as specific feedback as we can on kind of what you could have done differently to have a stronger application in the future.
And how much money does SIPA have for Gov grants this year?
Yeah, so we don't budget it that way. We really try to look at each application individually and make sort of a decision on whether it merits an award. Our previous cohorts have been between 10 and 12 million total for each cohort. I think, again, even without having kind of a really specific budget target, we've, pretty consistently stayed in that ballpark. So, keep that in mind. If you're thinking about submitting a proposal and you're going to ask for $5 million, 10 to 12 million is the entire pool. So $5 million would be a pretty big ask. So I think, again, we don't have a specific sort of number. We do, but that's most likely the ballpark of where things are.
Excellent. Thank you. And Beth, there's one for you. If the total amount for a project exceeds the microgrant by 5 to 10 times, is it okay to still apply for the microgrant to pay towards it? Or would we need to submit for the main grant, which I'm assuming you mean the Gov grants?
Yeah, it's absolutely okay for you to go ahead and apply for the micro grant, even though your project is big. Just don't ask for more than the $10,000.
And in the chat, what has been the typical percentage of successful applications? Let's see, we got 140 microgrants last year, is that correct? And I believe we awarded 42.
Pretty close.
And yeah, and for Gov grants, the percentage is a little bit higher, but it is, I think more than 40, less than 50%. But with only 3 cycles, those percentages have sort of fluctuated quite a bit. So I don't think we really have a typical at this stage. But like I said, we do decline more than we award.
And where can we find a list of past Gov grants to get some examples?
We do not publish the list of past awards. And I will give a couple reasons for that. The first is, like I said, we're a very new program. And so we kind of have been waiting to sort of have enough of a sample size of awards so that we feel comfortable that putting it out there won't sort of artificially skew the applications towards trying to submit for the same ideas that have already been awarded. And then the other reason is basically just capacity. We don't want to just put out a list of awards. We really want to give you guys a dashboard with some data on all of that stuff we talked about with the KPIs, and project success is really important to us. And so we would really like to put that out there with more than just a list, so that you have that context and really can understand the projects at a deeper level. So that is very much on our to-do list. But like I said, with the 2 cycles last year being condensed, into a 12-month period, we really didn't have time to, spend a lot on that kind of, nice to have. So we know that people want it. And we do very much plan to put that out in the future, but we have not done it yet. And we're not going to put it out as just a list.
And we do have the list of the, as Beth mentioned, microgrant winners, and you can find that here on our microgrant page. There's 2025 recipients, and then at the bottom of there is the map that has the list of everyone for each year. So you can click on those dots to get more information. Any other questions for us? All right. Well, again, thank you all for joining us. We are really glad that you came here. Please don't hesitate to contact any of us if you have any follow-up questions, you want to share some of those details about your projects and maybe get some more assistance. Don't forget, we've got some great webinars coming up. March 11th, Boston Consulting Group will be sharing how to build digital services that people actually want to use. On March 25th, we'll have Cornflower Labs, who will be sharing about their new AI chatbot. April 1st, Kaizen Labs will review how to streamline mobile reservation systems, especially for special districts. And April 15th, we've got MSISAC coming in to talk about elevating your security plan. Our regional workshops are coming back. They'll be starting in April and May. We will be in Huerfano County and Delta County and the town of Lyman. So if you are in those areas, please come join us. We'd love to see you, meet you in person, and have you join us for those fun days that we organize. You can find all of this information on our website, sipa.colorado.gov. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and read through it because we've got a lot of great info in there. And like I said, reach out to us anytime because we're here to help you. If you want to return to this webinar, we will be getting it up on our YouTube channel once we can get that processed and the captions added. And so be looking out for that. And otherwise, make it a wonderful day. Thank you again for joining us.